Before the scientific gaze of the 19th century was fully turned upon America's shores, maritime trade operated in a state of perilous coastal anarchy. Imagine the bustle of early American ports, New York, Boston, Charleston, the economic lifeblood of the new republic surging with vessels bearing precious cargo. Yet, once these ships left the familiar harbor mouths, they were guided less by accurate science and more by intuition, local knowledge, and woefully inadequate charts. The maps that did exist were often reproductions of old British or French surveys, fraught with errors, based on magnetic compass readings that shifted over time or simply drawn from memory and crude estimates. This lack of precise knowledge came at a staggering, often unrecorded cost. Every year, countless vessels were lost, not to violent storms in the open ocean, but to unexpected shoals, submerged rocks, and currents lurking just miles from safe harbor. A captain might know his latitude, but without a reliable nautical chart, a slight misjudgment of longitude could send a perfectly sound ship onto an unseen hazard, shattering the hull and ruining fortunes. Shipwrecks were not just a disaster for the vessel and crew, they introduced volatility into the nascent economy, raising insurance rates and stifling the growth of American global commerce. By the early 1800s, the need for a standardized, national, and scientific survey of the coast became an urgent national security and economic imperative. It was President Thomas Jefferson, a man as devoted to science as he was to democracy, who recognized this deep, fundamental need. In 1807, he signed the act establishing the Survey of the Coast, authorizing the work that would eventually span over a century. The goal was simple yet monumental: to map the entire coastline with such geometric precision that a ship could navigate by the chart alone, day or night, fog or clear sky. But the path from Jefferson's ambitious idea to the first reliable chart would prove to be a long, challenging voyage of its own. The man eventually tasked with bringing Jefferson's vision to life was Ferdinand Rudolf Hassler, a brilliant Swiss-born mathematician and geodesist. His selection was controversial. Americans questioned why a foreign scientist was needed for such a vital national undertaking. Yet, Hassler's methodology was unassailable. He insisted that the survey must be based on pure, abstract geometry, specifically a technique known as triangulation. This was the only way to ensure the absolute precision demanded by safe navigation. Triangulation is, by its very nature, a painstaking process. It begins with the measurement of a single, highly accurate baseline, a measured length of ground, perhaps a few miles long, which took Hassler's teams weeks or even months to lay out and measure with specialized, temperature-controlled measuring chains. From the endpoints of this baseline, a vast network of interconnected triangles would be built, mathematically extending the known distance across bays, over mountains, and down the coastline. Surveyors did not measure every distance. Instead, they carefully measured angles using highly precise instruments called theodolites, often positioned atop high wooden towers built specifically for the task. Imagine the scene: a lone surveyor, often high above the ground, painstakingly aligning an instrument to catch the reflection of a light from another station miles away, sometimes visible only for a few minutes at dawn or dusk. Each angle had to be measured multiple times, under different conditions, and recorded with 6 or 7 digits of decimal precision. An error in a single angle could compound across the miles, rendering hundreds of subsequent measurements useless. Hassler's almost fanatical insistence on this accuracy caused immense delays and sparked furious political opposition from those demanding quick results. He was often starved of funding, facing hostile congressional committees, and even had to spend years in Europe waiting for specialized instruments to be made. But Hassler stood firm. The geometric integrity of the nation's charts could not be compromised for political expediency. His meticulous labor, though slow, eventually created the foundational, immovable points that would anchor every safe harbor map the United States would ever produce. While Hassler's teams meticulously established the fixed points of the land using triangulation, the second, equally arduous part of the survey, the hydrography, was focused on mapping the fluid, constantly changing world beneath the water's surface. This involved finding and charting the deep sleepers, the unseen rocks, sandbars, and shoals that were silent assassins of American vessels. This work required moving from the solid geometry of the shore to the unpredictable nature of the sea. The primary tool for this task was astonishingly simple: the lead line, a length of rope marked at regular intervals with a piece of lead weight attached to the end. Surveying vessels, often small, maneuverable sloops, would sail back and forth in precise parallel lines, stopping at regular intervals while a crewman dropped the lead line and shouted the depth reading or sounding back to the recorder. They would also take samples of the bottom, sand, mud, rock, using wax affixed to the lead, which helped mariners anchor safely. This process was repeated thousands of times, day after day, in every condition imaginable. The detail required was relentless. To adequately map a busy harbor entrance, soundings might be needed every 50 or 100 yards across miles of ocean floor. Imagine the endless, monotonous cycle. By the mark, 5.5, sandy bottom. By the deep, 4. Each reading had to be referenced back to the nearest triangulation point on shore and correlated with the state of the tide at that exact moment. Any submerged feature, a sudden drop-off, a ridge, or a wreck, was marked with intense scrutiny, requiring further, closer passes by the sounding boat. This work was tedious, cold, and often dangerous, especially when working in strong currents or near exposed rocky inlets. The crews had to contend with long stretches of seasickness, relentless sun, and the constant threat of bad weather, all while performing an operation that required near-perfect spatial awareness. Yet, it was this quiet, repetitive commitment to measurement that transformed the coast from a wild, unknown region into a legible, navigable space, allowing ships to pass safely over the very dangers that had haunted American commerce for decades. The fruit of this patient labor, the completed nautical chart, was not a dazzling invention, but a quietly revolutionary document. When the first comprehensive charts were finally published and distributed to mariners, they represented a profound shift. For the first time, an American captain could navigate his ship into a foreign port not with a vague sketch, but with a document whose accuracy was guaranteed by the finest scientific minds and instruments in the nation. The charts reduced shipwrecks, lowered insurance rates, and injected a new level of confidence into maritime trade, fueling America's ascent as a commercial power. The Coast Survey, having proven its value, expanded rapidly. The rush for California gold necessitated the immediate extension of the survey to the Pacific coast, requiring new decades of painstaking triangulation across rugged mountain ranges. During the Civil War, the survey's expertise proved indispensable. Its scientists and ships were quickly absorbed into the Union war effort, generating charts of vital southern harbors and rivers used by the Navy for blockades and troop movements. Their intimate knowledge of the coast provided a crucial, often unseen strategic advantage. Today, the Coast Survey continues its work as part of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. The lead line has been replaced by sophisticated multi-beam sonar, and paper charts are giving way to digital electronic navigation systems. But the fundamental principle remains the same. The modern safety of our ports, the speed of global commerce, and the integrity of our coastal science all stand upon the bedrock of that tedious, uncompromising geometry established by Hassler and his patient surveyors over a century ago. It is a legacy of dedication to precision, a story of how a seemingly boring scientific pursuit created the invisible lines of safety that silently guide every ship that approaches American shores. A foundational act of national organization that allows us all to rest easy.